Lawyers of Reddit, which fictional villain would you have the easiest time defending? Story 1, Dr. Doofenshmirtz. All of his inventions ultimately only end up stealing or damaging the creations of two kids, so he could probably be let out with a theft charge. Really, he's just a lonely, unloved man trying to be seen in the world. Good thing he has his therapy platypus. Story 2, The Wicked Witch of the West. She was angry at Dorothy, but then again, Dorothy dropped a house on her sister, and then grave robbed the witch's sister's body, with Glinda's help. The shoes were rightfully the witch's anyway, presuming she was her sister's only heir and her sister died intestate. All the witch wanted was for Dorothy to apologize and return the slippers she stole. Everything else that happened was the result of the witch's reasonable attempts to defend herself and her property against Dorothy's killing, theft, and trespass. Story 3. When I was a kid, I remember being devastated in the movie Big Daddy when the social worker took Zach and Cody away from Adam Sandler. But after watching it again as an adult, although still sad, I'm thinking, yay, a fucking course they're going to take him away from this stranger. So the social worker from Big Daddy is a layup case. Story 4, Kronk from Emperor's New Groove. He does technically kidnap Kuzco, but I think we could get his sentence way reduced. I think he could charm the jury, or completely blow up his own case in the stand. It could be a fun surprise. Story 5, Ayanal, but Gaston. The Beast is basically kidnapping people, and you can argue he is violent. Heck, the entire village was on Gaston's side and would acquit him. Story 6. Define easiest time defending. If you define it as, I think they have an easy case to win, then probably Gaston, since hunting a beast that is a threat to members of your town isn't a crime. Remember, Beast did lock up Belle's dad, and there's no reason to believe that Beast couldn't go evil again during the inevitable divorce. If you mean the one I'm going to most enjoy defending, then pick the richest one. It's a criminal client. Write me a check and don't call me every 10 minutes from the jail and I'm a happy camper. Story 7. It's kind of scary how little of what went on in the Truman Show would actually be illegal in the real world. There's a few fringe cases, most notably actively preventing Truman from leaving once he realized he was in a fake world and expressed a desire to escape. But pretty much everything up to that point is very legal, and it would be hard to press charges against the director, or anyone else, for the basic premise of raising a child in a reality show without their knowledge. Story 8, Smog. He had to have earned squatters' rights, be considered an adverse possessor of the property after all that time, and the House of Durin did abandon the property. I think he had a right to defend his home. Edit. Plus statute of limitations on that whole burning the city thing when he first arrived. Edit 2. You are all correct about adverse possession. Corrected and thank you. Story 9. Probably Palpatine. Republic law doesn't apply because he can bend it. Also, as Supreme Chancellor, he probably has immunity. Imperial law doesn't apply either because I assume he is untouchable there. And real-world law could also be tricky. All his dirty work was done by his students who are conveniently dead. Good luck proving they did anything on his orders. Being a Sith Lord isn't a crime because freedom of religion. His fight against the Jedi was self-defense, as it was an attack against him with religious motives. Even the killing of Higo Damask would be impossible to prove as there were no witnesses, and nobody even know they were on Coruscant together. And the creation of the Empire was approved by the Senate. He didn't even abduct Maul. He was given to him. The most realistic thing would be conspiracy to destroy the Republic or something. But it sounds like a conspiracy theory to claim there was this big Sith rule of two thing going on over centuries. And even if it got to trial somehow, if it is a jury trial, the opposition would have a very hard time. Story 10. The Joker. Your Honor. My client, who is clearly suffering from schizophrenic delusions and various other mental issues, was punched in the face by a billionaire in a rubber gimp suit. And worse. The Gotham City Police Commissioner asked him to do it. Story 11. Yellowjacket from Ant-Man. He killed one dude, but there's zero evidence of that. All he did was use his own company's research to try to create a new weapon. Maybe not particularly moral, but he didn't do anything wrong until Lang and Pym stole from him and destroyed his entire office building. After that, he did some property damage, but Pym even said that the shrinking tech could affect his mind, so there's a completely reasonable defense that his behavior was affected beyond what he's aware of. Furthermore, since Pym created the tech and knew full well that it could affect the mind and didn't do anything to warn Darren Cross about it, it's really his fault. Story 12. In my jurisdiction, I would say Damien from The Omen. Minimum age for delinquency adjudication is 12, and in the first movie he's 5, so he couldn't be tried for any of his evil doings. Story 13. Scar. Yes, he murdered his brother, murdered his nephew, turned his entire family into slavery, but he's a cat. Just show some of his baby picture to the jury, a few video of him trying to eat Zazu, and after a few, he would walk as a free cat. Story 14. The evil stepmother from Cinderella. The worst thing she did was make Cinderella work a lot, but if she's old enough to marry, then she's old enough to help around the house. Story 15. I feel like Ganondorf would be a nice pick. According to the laws of the Hylian world, he's just, like, Supposed to be doing evil stuff all the time. The curse has to be fulfilled throughout generations. There's always a hero, an evil person, and a goddess. Kind of like a contract, huh? Story 16. Not a lawyer, but Sauron. He was simply trying to get a treasure that was stolen from him while employing orcs whom the rest of the races are very racist towards. Edit. I know Sauron is guilty, and of all the atrocities Jade did, I just had to say this as a member of our Sauron did nothing wrong. Story 17, Ursula. Basic contract action. Ariel may have been a minor, but that only makes the contract voidable, not invalid. At no point did Ariel ask to void the contract. Instead, her father decided to sign his own contract. King Triton is a sophisticated party who entered into a binding contract. King Triton was the one who was willing to throw his kingdom away to bail out his favorite daughter. Story 18. Tulkinghorn from Bleak House, Old Man Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, Cruella de Vil. I would never take a case involving Dr. House or Sherlock Holmes, though. Story 19. I know, but the bad guy attorney in B-movie would have killed that case if any actual lawyering occurred. He went to court against a bug and an insane woman. Story 20. Cruella de Vil. She would be an Instagram fashion sensation. She wouldn't need defending now, because no one knows the shady behind the scenes of even the biggest fashion companies. What's 101 Dalmatians compared to a few sweatshops? Story 21. Hans from Frozen. I'm not a lawyer, but he basically wanted to legally become ruler of a kingdom through marriage. You could make a credible case that Elsa was a threat to the kingdom, and that she was unfit to rule since she accidentally harmed her own sister. Hans going after her was an effort to protect the kingdom. He even stopped a henchman from shooting her in the chest, so he was clearly trying to use the least amount of violence necessary. Story 22. Bucky Barnes Winter Soldier. I think the insanity defense, though it's not called that anymore, would actually apply here. Get a group of certified expert psychiatrists and doctors together, get their testimony depositions, set a competency hearing. In the event he is deemed competent, use witness testimony and the USSR Hydra documentation to prove he wasn't in charge of his actions. Boom. Done. Story 23. Not a lawyer, but Umbridge from Harry Potter, because she never committed a single crime. In fact, she changed rules and laws specifically so she could do what she did. The worst action she committed was making Harry write with a quill that scarred him. However, we know from Filch that capital, edit, I meant corporal, punishment within schools is still allowed in the wizarding world, and the only reason it doesn't continue at Hogwarts is because Dumbledore doesn't allow it. With Dumbledore gone, the headmistress is well within her rights to bring back the practice. Story 24. Ed Rooney from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's just trying to do his job. I would not want to defend the actor who played him, of course. Also, basically every evil rich land developer, It's a Wonderful Life, Caddyshack, Batteries Not Included, the Vogons from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The law already protects those guys. It'd be like shooting fish in a barrel. Story 25. Any WandaVision viewing lawyers around? What did Hayward even get arrested over? Seemed like he did his director of a government defense agency job. Story 26. Agatha Harkness. What did she do that was so wrong, exactly? The worst I can come up with is that she tried to stop someone with a notoriously out-of-control destructive history from continuing to mind rape an entire town of people who were clearly traumatized by it. Story 27. Not a lawyer, but I've got a sum. If King Boo hadn't gone out of his way to trap the Mario brothers, he could have pressed charges against Professor Egad for imprisoning all those ghosts into paintings and later trespassing on the mansion he magically created. Nasty Gnork was wrongfully banished to a junkyard without due legal process, and didn't actually attack the dragons until publicly provoked on live television, in such a way that one could try to frame it as the dragons doing it on purpose, as well as charging the dragons with harassment and neglecting due process. GLaDOS was improperly programmed, and once the morality core was removed, no longer understood right from wrong, and thus could have a legit insanity plea, as she was programmed to only care about her experiments. Otto from Wall-E would have the same argument. Hal, 9000, was acting in self-defense. The humans on board wanted to shut him down over one single error. Frankenstein's monster was abandoned at birth and treated cruelly his whole life. Plus, he was living basically in the wild with no one to teach him right from wrong. And thus, one could convince the judge he just needs psychiatric help. Plus, the creature could press child neglect charges onto Victor Frankenstein. It would be hard to convict the Invisible Man, the original, not the shitty 2021, of anything, because how do you even prove he was there? And technically he hadn't gone through with any of the crimes he wanted to commit. Most werewolves have no control over their actions. Story 28. Otto Octavius, aka Doc Ock. The neural interface affected his mind. He couldn't do much about it. It was his gallium arms that harmed people, not him. I'm not actually a lawyer, but this would be hard to go up against, right? Story 29. Gus Fring, because he would absolutely have his alibis and defense plans schemed down to the most minute detail. All he would need would be an earnest and detail-oriented storyteller, and I can do that. Story 30. The Machines in the Matrix. While ultimately Agent Smith is the ultimate villain and something different from the machines are definitely made to be the antagonist against humanity. But the fact is, the machines actually saved humanity and put a large amount of effort into preserving them. And not just preserving them, but trying to actually give them decent lives. The humans in the history of the Matrix literally blacked out the skies in an effort to commit genocide against the machines, and in turn, dooming themselves. From the machines' perspective, humanity was a dangerous species that needed to be controlled and contained. But they also had enough reverence for their creators to want to preserve them and keep them as happy as they could be. Remember, the architect says that the first Matrix was a literal paradise, but too many humans rejected it. They weren't just trying to enslave us, there was this sense of compassion to it. And yes, they use people as batteries, but it isn't like the machines couldn't just do nuclear power, leave the planet completely and use solar power, wind energy, geothermal energy. They had tons of choices, but instead put effort into keeping humans alive instead. You also meet various programs that have legit respect for human philosophy and are compassionate towards humans. IMO, the humans in the Matrix, are like the child throwing a tantrum against the parents trying to protect them. Story 31, I'm having trouble with some of these like Smog or Palpatine or the Wicked Witch of the West. What legal system is claiming jurisdiction over these folks? What statutes govern in the locations of their supposed crimes? Story 32, Francis from Deadpool, who does human testing on Wade Wilson and turns him into a mutant. Technically, he signed up for it, so it wasn't really Francis's fault. Also not a lawyer. This is the first time I've read every comment in a sub. Great question, OP. Story 33, Itachi Uchiha, was a child soldier ordered to spy on his own clan. He saw firsthand during the Third Great Ninja War the devastation war had on his village. That made him a pacifist early on, and this is something the Leaf Village elders exploited when they caught wind of the planned coup by the Uchiha clan. If a civil war broke out in the Leaf, it would allow other villages to attack starting the Fourth Great Ninja War. So the elder ordered Itachi to kill his clan. He was only 13 years old when he executed the order. Story 34. Paul, played by Rob Lowe, from Tommy Boy. At the end of the movie, it's stated he's facing charges for computer fraud. Hard to believe the state could ever produce evidence to convict him beyond a reasonable doubt, especially given early 90s computer technology. That said, I'd hate to defend the guy that tried to bring down Callahan Auto. Story 35. I think you need to define defending. Are you trying to exonerate the client, or the easiest to represent in court? I'd argue that Joker in The Dark Knight or Bane in The Dark Knight Rises would be very easy cases. They committed completely horrendous crimes and did so in public and even did them on the news and filmed stuff. That case is a layup. I just show up, try to convince them to take a plea, or I sit back during trial and just make sure the state doesn't put forth any false evidence or tries to otherwise railroad them in court. And since they are plainly guilty, you don't lose sleep when they get convicted. Story 36. Saw a few superhero villains here, but not the one I'd want to defend. Ra's al Ghul. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I present to you as proof that humanity are a blight and should be scourged. Twitter. Story 37. Mr. Freeze. Quest to save his dying wife of a super rare disease. Employer destroyed his body in the process, turning him into a popsicle villain. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Story 38. Honored chairman, my client Mr. Alduin, firstborn of Akatosh, is innocent. Not only is he innocent, but is in fact himself a victim of the blatant anti-dragon racism of this jury. There is no law against returning to live, neither against dragon necromancy. Rather than being accused of bringing this ancient menace back to Tamriel, my client ought to be celebrated as the talented medical professional he is, managing to give back their lives to dozens of hardworking dragons and their families. When in Helgen, my client did not burn a town and slaughter its people, but attempted to interrupt the illegal execution of one, Ulfric Stormcloak, who was to be executed without a proper trial. He is justified in this by the right to help in distress from Section 32 STGB. Yes, this is a German trial. When violently attacked by the so-called Dragonborn, the name itself being an attempt to mock my client, while performing life-giving surgery in the town of Kynesgrove, my client even sought to avoid the confrontation and flew away. Then again, he was brutally attacked when visiting a relative at his domicile in the Throat of the World. This time, the attacker known as Dragonborn even used what is commonly known as dragon shouting, a blatant infringement of my client's intellectual property. This time, my client was forced to use self-defense to avoid being murdered by this copyright-infringing lunatic. The defense would like to withdraw the description of lunatic, and still my client chose to withdraw. This demonstrates how much my client detests physical violence and is a mere victim. Then my client returned to his private domicile in the lovely town of Sovngarde. Here the prosecution falsely alleges that my client consumed the souls of the hallowed dead using a soul snare. I would suggest the prosecution go back, looks in their law books for once, and spares us this charade. There is no legal concept of the soul, which in turn means it cannot be legally protected. This could at most be considered disturbing the resting of the dead of Section 168 say GB, but then again, this only protects the physical remains of the dead, which are to be treated separately from their souls. Again, my client was attacked but luckily survived when the attacker known as Dragonborn ate 154 wheels of cheese mid-combat of his own volition and died of a heart attack. Thank you, Chairman. The defense rests. Story 39. Ianal. But I have to imagine all of the Scooby-Doo villains would be easy to defend. Most of them are just dudes hanging around on property they own, dressed in costumes, scaring people who are trespassing. Story 40. Finally, a question that applies to me. See username for 11 plus years. Gustavo Fring from Breaking Bad. Lot of good character evidence with his work in the community. Plenty of resources to mount a proper defense. Lot of underlings for obfuscation and distance between the drugs. Despite being a monster, I also suspect Gustavo would be a more methodical client who understood the realities of a complex criminal case. I wouldn't have to deal with extreme emotional swings or mental health episodes. He would be consistently focused like the businessman that he is. Story 41. Ursula from Little Mermaid. She gave Ariel what she wanted and accepted the going price for marrying a prince, which is loss of your voice, and Ariel accepted the terms. She wanted to rule the underworld, and TBH, she'd have done a much better job than Triton, who was clearly way too invested in his six-pack and policing his daughters to be giving all of his attention to his realm. Ursula is clearly a victim of the patriarchy, which only values the feminine for beauty. Story 42. Magneto. Your Honor, despite being a traumatized victim in the Holocaust, he had managed to set up community programs for underserved and victimized youths. You might even say his enthusiasm to help youths and protect them from a second Holocaust is his only crime. What jury is going to convict an elderly, charismatic man who lived through the Holocaust? Sure, news companies are going to smear him since people claim he tried to genocide a good portion of humans, but that's the news. Next day, they'll be saying he didn't try hard enough. Story 43. I would have to go with Mr. Long John Silver from Treasure Planet. Granted, he was a pirate, but as far as crimes we can see in the movie, only attempted mutiny and attempted theft. He never killed anyone, or tried to. All he wanted was a larger share of the treasure that they were looking for. It could be argued that the captain was knowingly deceiving the crew as to the danger in the mission, and Silver actively kept the bloodthirsty crew from slaughtering everybody on the ship. Story 44. Ianal. But I would imagine Michael the trolley boy from Hot Fuzz would be a simple defense since he has a child's mind, raised in a home by his mother's sister, and was being manipulated by town authority figures, including his boss. Story 45. Milton Wadhams from Office Space. Asterisk. Somebody keeps taking his stapler, asterisk. He was told he could listen to his radio at a reasonable volume from 9 to 11, asterisk. The slices were much too large and he clearly got skipped over for birthday cake, asterisk. They started storing boxes in his cubicle, asterisk. They moved his desk to the basement, asterisk. They stopped sending his checks, and payroll gave him the runaround, asterisk. He warned them that he could set the whole place on fire, but nobody listened, asterisk. He said no salt on the margarita. Story 46. Not a lawyer. Also not a defense, but I have nowhere else to brag about this. In Year 8 literature class, I successfully prosecuted the narrator of Poe's The Telltale Heart against an insanity defense. Story 47. Ianal, but curveball. Hades as asterisk plaintiff asterisk. At the end of Hercules, Hades and the title character make a deal, the text of which is presented in two ways. Take me in Meg's place. You get her out. She goes. You stay. Hercules gains his godhood along the way, but he's still bound by the contract. He gets Meg out, she goes, and he leaves to live happily ever after with her. And what does he do to Hades? Sucker punches him into the river of death. Not only is that a clear-cut case of battery, but it's a direct violation of their contract. Story 48. Jabba the Hutt. His syndicate is based outside of Republic and later Imperial borders. Therefore, he isn't subject to such law. Plus, he granted the Republic safe passes through some hyperspace routes after they rescued his son, so he's got it good with them. Story 49. Dr. Doof, if you count him as one. All his naters are either goofily not working or actually beneficial to the world, if you use it right, and he do pay for his parts. He didn't just steal a whole lot stuff, he pay for what he need to build the stuff. He is just a guy who has been the underdog, the black sheep of family for way too long, who just really needs some good old TLC that he deserved, also for way too long. A person who is just being reject for so many years that he already doubt if the only way he can be accepted is to be the bad guy, like Megamind or Nick Wilde once used to be. Story 50. Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare remake. I mean, he took some kids to the secret room in the basement. One kid got scratched up, but we don't know how. Could have been an accident. So the parents jumped to conclusions and torched the guy. I got the feeling Freddy actually loved those kids. He didn't deserve to get torched. Maybe a restraining order or something. There was no mention or proof of any sexual assault, I'm sure of it.